The moment you walk through the doors, you're already being managed. Not by a person, by a floor plan. Retailers have a name for the first 10 to 15 feet of any store, the decompression zone. It's the space right inside the entrance where you're still mentally transitioning from the parking lot, the sidewalk, the weather, from outside to shopping. Store designers know you're not actually absorbing information in that zone. You're just slowing down, which is exactly why almost nothing important is ever placed there. No key promotions, no essential items. It's a buffer deliberately empty of decisions so that by the time you do start noticing things, you're calm, oriented, and ready to be steered. There's actually a name for the broader phenomenon this sets up. Retail designers sometimes call it the Gruen Transfer, after the architect Victor Gruen, who helped pioneer the modern shopping mall in the mid-20th century. The idea is simple, but a little unsettling. A well-designed commercial space is meant to disorient you, just slightly. Curved walkways instead of straight lines. No clocks, no clear sight line to the exit. The goal is to interrupt the purposeful, task-focused mindset you walked in with "I need milk and toothpaste," and replace it with a looser, more wandering, more impulsive state of mind. Gruen himself reportedly grew uncomfortable with how his own ideas were used, but the technique stuck around because it works. And once you're in that looser state, most stores don't let you wander randomly. They bend you. Walk into almost any supermarket, big box store, or IKEA, and pay attention to which way your feet turn. In most cases, you'll be nudged to the right. This isn't an accident, and it isn't universal law, but it's a well-documented tendency tied to the fact that most people are right-handed and right-eye dominant and tend to move counterclockwise through open spaces when given no other cue. Retailers built entire layouts around this. Push the cart in, drift right, loop the perimeter. That single design choice determines the entire order in which you encounter every product in the building. IKEA takes this idea and turns it into something much more deliberate. A single, forced, winding path through the entire store, with almost no shortcuts back to the exit. You don't choose your route through IKEA. IKEA chooses it for you. That long, snaking path is designed to expose you to as much inventory as physically possible in a carefully sequenced order. Inspirational showroom displays first, to get you dreaming and forming a mental shopping list, then the actual warehouse aisles later, where you fill a cart with things you've already convinced yourself you need. The occasional shortcuts that do exist are usually a little hidden, a little unmarked, precisely because a shortcut is a moment where the store loses control of your path. Which brings us back to a more ordinary supermarket's perimeter, because in most grocery stores, the outer ring is where you'll find the things you actually came for. Produce, dairy, meat, bread, the staples. Almost every trip to a grocery store, no matter what's on your list, forces you into contact with the full outer loop of the store before you're done. That's not convenience. That's architecture doing the work of a salesperson, because to get milk and eggs, you have to walk past everything else first. Now think about the aisles themselves, because even inside them, almost nothing is at eye level by accident. Shelving is a rented stage, and the most valuable real estate on it is the band roughly between your eyes and your chest. Retail analysts sometimes call it, half-jokingly, the eye level is by level zone. Products placed there tend to sell better than identical products placed higher or lower. Not because they're better, but because they require zero physical or mental effort to notice. Brands pay for that shelf space. Store brand and lower margin items often get pushed down to knee height or up above your natural sight line, where you have to actively look for them. If you've ever had to crouch down to find the cheaper version of something, that wasn't bad luck. That was a negotiated shelf placement. There's a second, smaller version of this same trick aimed specifically at children. The child's eye level shelf, roughly 2 to 3 feet off the ground, right where a kid walking beside a cart naturally looks. That's where you'll find the brightly colored cereal boxes with cartoon mascots, the small toys, the candy at exactly the height a small hand can reach without help. It's the same real estate logic as the adult eye-level shelf, just recalibrated for a shorter customer who has an unusually large amount of influence over what ends up in the cart. And it's not just where products sit, it's how many of them sit there. Ever notice a wall of nearly identical cereal boxes or 20 near-identical shampoo variants stretching down an aisle? That's called a wall of abundance, and it's doing something subtle to your brain. It signals trust and choice, even when the actual functional differences between products are tiny. More facings on a shelf doesn't just mean more stock. It visually communicates that a brand is dominant, popular, and safe to choose purely through repetition and volume. Then there's the geometry of the aisle itself. Grocery aisles are often deliberately just a little narrower than they need to be. Narrow enough that carts occasionally brush, that you feel slightly crowded. There's research in environmental psychology suggesting that mild physical crowding can subtly increase feelings of urgency and reduce deliberate, careful decision-making, pushing shoppers toward faster, more instinctive choices instead of comparison shopping. A wide-open, spacious aisle invites you to slow down and think. A slightly tight one nudges you to just grab something and keep moving. Let's talk about light and color for a moment, because these are doing more work than most shoppers ever consciously register. Produce sections are famously lit with warmer, slightly reddish or pink tone bulbs, specifically because that light makes fruits and vegetables look fresher and more vivid than they'd look under neutral white light. Meat counters use their own carefully calibrated lighting for the same reason, to make color look more appetizing than it might look under your kitchen's ordinary bulbs. Meanwhile, high-end boutiques often go the opposite direction. Dimmer, warmer, more intimate lighting that slows your pace and makes you feel like you've entered somewhere special, worth lingering in. While discount and warehouse-style retailers tend to use flat, bright, evenly lit fluorescent lighting that signals efficiency, low overhead, and, by implication, low prices. The lighting itself is part of the pricing message before you've even looked at a single tag. Now let's talk about the price tags themselves, because pricing is its own entire discipline of psychological design. You've almost certainly noticed that prices tend to end in 0.99 or 0.97 instead of a round number. That's called charm pricing, and there's genuine published research showing that shoppers process a price like $19.99 as meaningfully closer to $19 than a $20, even though the actual difference is a single cent. Your brain reads the first digit and anchors there before fully processing the rest. There's a related trick called anchor pricing, or sometimes decoy pricing. You'll see it constantly with subscription tiers or with was $80, now $45 signage. The original, higher number doesn't just disappear once it's crossed out. It stays in your head as a reference point, making the new number feel like a bargain by comparison, regardless of whether $45 was ever really a fair price for the item in the first place. Some retailers have faced real scrutiny and even lawsuits over inflated original prices used purely to make a markdown look more dramatic than it actually is. And then there are loss leaders, items priced at or even below cost specifically to get you through the door. A supermarket might sell milk, eggs, or a rotisserie chicken at a price that barely covers or doesn't cover its own cost because the store isn't trying to make money on that one item. It's trying to earn your entire shopping trip. Once you're inside, buying the cheap chicken, the store is betting, correctly most of the time, that you'll also pick up a cart's worth of higher margin items along the way. Sound is doing its own quiet work too. Most retail environments use background music deliberately, not decoratively. Slower tempo music has been linked in several published studies to shoppers spending more time in a store and, in some cases, spending more money. The theory being that a slower tempo unconsciously encourages a slower walking pace, which means more time in front of more products. Fast-paced environments, on the other hand, a lot of fast food restaurants, for instance, often use faster music specifically to move customers through more quickly. Same tool, opposite goal, depending on whether the business wants you to linger or to turn over the table. Smell works on a similar unconscious level. The scent of fresh bread near a bakery section or fresh coffee near a cafe counter isn't always coming entirely from the food itself. Some stores actively reinforce specific scents through the ventilation system because scent has an unusually direct route to the parts of the brain involved in memory and emotion. It doesn't have to be a conscious decision on your part. You just start to feel hungrier or more at ease, and that mood quietly shapes what you decide to buy. Now let's talk about the end cap that display at the end of each aisle facing the main walkway. It's some of the most expensive real estate in the entire store, and brands pay real money to be featured there. Here's the trick, though. An end cap display is designed to feel like a deal, whether or not it actually is one. Bright signage, bold colors, a big stack of product. All of it triggers the same mental shortcut. This must be on sale. This must be a good time to buy. Multiple retail studies have found that products placed on end caps sell dramatically better than the same products in their normal aisle position, even when the price hasn't changed at all. The display itself is the persuasion. The discount is optional. Closely related is the psychology of scarcity and urgency. Limited time only. While supplies last. Only 3 left in stock. Whether or not any of that is strictly true in a given case, the underlying mechanism is well understood in behavioral psychology. People consistently value things more and decide faster when they believe availability is limited or closing. A calm, unhurried shopper compares prices and reads labels. An urgent one grabs the item and moves on before someone else gets it. None of this stays confined to the physical aisle anymore, either. Loyalty cards and store apps aren't just a convenience for you. They're a data collection tool for the retailer. Every scan links your purchase history to your identity, which lets a store build a detailed profile of your habits. What you buy, how often, what you're likely to run out of soon, and what kind of coupon or promotion is most likely to actually change your behavior rather than just being ignored. The personalized deals that show up in a store app aren't random generosity. They're targeted based on exactly what's already been observed about you. Self-checkout kiosks, oddly enough, are part of this same broader design logic, even though they look like the opposite of manipulation. No employee, no upsell, just you and a screen. But the screen itself is still doing quiet design work, suggesting a last-minute add-on before you finish, prompting a donation, nudging a loyalty sign-up, timing its prompt for the exact moment you're least likely to say no because you're already almost done and just want to leave. And then there's checkout itself, or rather, the physical line for stores that still have one. The last few feet of the entire experience, and arguably the most cynically engineered part of it. This is where you'll find the smallest, cheapest, most impulse-friendly items. Candy, gum, tabloids, tiny travel-sized things you didn't come in for. By the time you're standing in that line, your guard is down. You've already made your real decisions. Your mental budget feels basically spent. So a $2 chocolate bar doesn't register as a real purchase decision anymore. It registers as an afterthought, almost free by comparison to the cart full of groceries you're already committed to. Even the checkout line itself is a design tool. A short wait keeps you calm. A slightly longer wait, standing directly next to a wall of impulse items, gives your eyes something to do, and gives the store more time to make its final pitch before you leave. None of this, individually, is some grand conspiracy. Most of it isn't even secret. Retailers write and publish papers about store layout optimization, and there's a whole professional field, sometimes called retail atmospherics, built entirely around this kind of design. Universities teach it. Consulting firms specialize in it. Store designers openly discuss decompression zones, sight lines, and dwell time the way an engineer discusses load-bearing walls. What makes it worth paying attention to isn't that any single tactic is sinister. It's that they all stack. The decompression zone gets you calm. The Gruen Transfer gets you a little disoriented and open to wandering. The forced perimeter walk, or in IKEA's case, the 4-single path, maximizes exposure. Eye-level placement, adult and child, maximizes visibility for the highest margin products. The narrow aisles push urgency. The warm produce lighting and charm pricing quietly reshape how fresh and how cheap things feel. The end caps and scarcity signage borrow the feeling of a deal, real or not. The music sets your pace. The scent sets your mood. The loyalty app quietly learns your habits between visits. And the checkout line, physical or digital, catches whatever's left of your willpower on the way out the door. You're not imagining that shopping trips take longer or that you leave with more than you meant to buy. That's not a personal failure of self-control. It's the predictable outcome of walking through a space that was mapped out, tested, and refined, often over decades, by people whose entire job is figuring out how human attention, habit, and mood actually work, and then building a floor plan around the answer. Knowing the layout doesn't make you immune to it. Understanding the Gruen transfer doesn't stop your feet from turning right. Knowing charm pricing is a trick doesn't make $19.99 feel like $20. That's what makes this kind of design so effective. It doesn't rely on you being unaware that persuasion exists in general. It relies on the fact that in the moment, standing in a bright, warm-lit aisle with soft music playing and a cart already half full, awareness and behavior are two very different things. But it does mean that the next time you find yourself detouring down an aisle you didn't plan to enter, or tossing something small into the cart in the checkout line, you can ask a useful question. Did I actually want this? Or did the